time for the show that takes on matters of Africa. Welcome. It's great to have you with us. This week we speak with Dr. Frank Aswani, who is the Vice President and Director of Strategic Relations at the Africa Leadership Academy, which is based in South Africa. He shares his insights into education and Africa. We get your views on the issues as well. And as always, we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gichuru. Dr. Frank Aswani has been with the Africa Leadership Academy since 2012. He's the Vice President and Director of Strategic Relations and is responsible for leading ALA's fundraising, marketing, communications, careers and internship program, as well as business network development and global partnerships. Frank is a veterinary doctor by training, having graduated from the University of Nairobi in Kenya, and he also has an MBA from the Gordon Institute of Business Studies, University of Pretoria, South Africa. Let's get his insights into Africa. Thank you so much, Frank, for making time for the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm particularly excited to have you on the show because we've interviewed Fred Swaneker, who started the Africa Leadership Academy, and you're a critical part of the team there. How is the Academy doing? What kind of young Africans are you looking to build?
The Academy is doing great. We're in our 6th year now. We've just graduated our 4th class. Taking in our 6th class, who've come from over 40 African countries this year, and we're in the process of taking in our 7th class. It's been a phenomenal journey to date. We definitely feel we're at the position whereby we're starting to create the next generation of African leaders. Even at the tender age of 21, some of our kids are doing stuff that you and I would never imagine people of that age to do. And the mantra that we live by, that if you're good enough, you're old enough, is truly coming alive.
Let's talk about the curriculum, right? And also, what do you do in addition to that to grow these young Africans?
So that's really what sets us apart, is our curriculum. So we take students from right across the continent. 45 African countries. We take Francophone kids, we take Anglophone, Lusophone kids. Very deliberately, we take 50% boys, 50% girls. In fact, the last 2 years, we've taken 55% girls, 45% boys.
Wow.
Yes. So and
that's deliberate, that's strategic.
That's very true. But also the girls interviewed better the last 2 years.
Wow.
That's something to say. But what's very unique is we're needs blind in our selection process. So we get kids from refugee camps. We get kids from the middle of Santon or Karen in Johannesburg and Karen in Nairobi.
So you're saying that the most affluent are in school with those who have come from the most difficult conditions.
It's not a school for the rich or the poor African, it's a school for the right African. Okay? So we work with about 3,000 partners to try and find these talented Africans, looking for kids especially who've got very high leadership qualities. We look for kids who've got passion for their communities, an entrepreneurial spirit, perseverance, and an acceptable academic capability. They don't have to be necessarily the brightest, but they have to have an acceptable academic capability. Then they come to us for a 2-year pre-university program. And the curriculum involves the A-levels, but they also do 2 years of entrepreneurship and leadership, which is very unique to us. So every student at the academy must be part of a business in the 2 years that they're there. The for-profit ones pay taxes to the school, the non-profit ones benefit from the tax. Each of these businesses has to report.
Explain that.
So some of the enterprises that we have on campus are for-profits and some are non-profits. Mm-hmm. So for example, I have a company that does all our merchandising, all our sweatshirts, water bottles, branded water bottles, mugs, etc. Fully student-run, CEO, CFO, marketing officer. And the students get hands-on practice on being in an enterprise. And I think the key part of what that does for us is that it enables the kids to get 21st century skills. Mm-hmm. The challenge of today's education system is that we're preparing kids for jobs that don't exist. Mm-hmm. We're preparing them to use technology that hasn't been invented yet. And we're preparing them to solve problems that we haven't fully conceptualized yet. So how do you prepare kids for that uncertain world? And there's a core benefit about giving them 21st century skills, analytical thinking, problem solving, collaborative skills, communication skills. And the current education system is what you and I and our fathers went through, which is about getting grades and not about what to do with the grades. And that's what is different about our curriculum.
It's a different world.
Very different
it's a different world. Just a short while ago, we had a gentleman I'm sure you know called James Irungu Mwangi, who is based in South Africa. You know him.
Yes.
And he said, the problem with the system is, again, just looking at education, we're not developing a skilled workforce that understands exactly what you're saying. So Africa Leadership Academy has come in to start to address this, but you are one academy based in South Africa where, you have excesses of people trying to get in there. So what advice would you then give to national governments, to private universities, to academics in terms of what needs to change in our countries to start to build a workforce that is capable?
Yeah. I think first of all, for me, your education plan is a key part of your country's strategic plan. So whether you've got Vision 2030, 2050, because these vary across Africa, you have to start thinking 20, 30, 40 years from now, what kind of workforce are we going to need and what skills are we going to need? And work backwards to today and start thinking, how are we going to produce those skilled people? How are we going to transform our current education systems to reflect the needs of the countries 10, 15, 20 years from now? And sadly, that is not happening. So I'd highly encourage people to invest as much in things like education as they invest in the thinking, not just the resources, but the thinking through education, as they invest in politics or other kind of things and elections and everything that comes with it. So I think there's huge need for people to take the planning around education a lot more seriously than they currently have, because we're doing a disservice for all these young people, churning them out and seeing education as an end in itself instead of seeing it as a means to an end. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, until we get to the point where we understand that just because you've got a degree doesn't mean you'll make it in life, and we have to get people getting the right kind of degrees with the right kind of skills, then we're just churning out people who are going to get into another backlog of workforce, people who are unemployable, and that doesn't help the country.
Right. It's very interesting that one of the things I've noticed in engaging with young people is that our university students are quite laid back in their approach. They're not quite as dynamic as the ordinary young person on the ground who probably had to leave school at Form 4, didn't have a chance to go into higher education, and is, let me use the word, is hustling.
Yes.
So your hustlers are dynamic, they're active. In a sense, is ALA trying to say we're growing academics here, we're growing people who understand the theory, but we're also building hustlers?
And people who know what it takes to survive, what it takes to create change. Mm-hmm. Because our whole concept of entrepreneurship for us is not about creating we don't teach entrepreneurship in the sense of saying that entrepreneurship is a reserve of the private sector. No, we teach an entrepreneurial mindset. Because there's no reason why you cannot be entrepreneurial in non-profits, in an NGO, or in government. So we're teaching people who can get into a situation and know how to approach a position, a problem, an opportunity, in a manner that you can get to a solution, okay? So the kind of leaders we're developing at the African Leadership Academy, we expect them to be impactful in government, in the non-profit sector, and in the private sector.
I love that you've said you should be entrepreneurial even in government.
Yes.
Explain that to our public, especially to our public servants.
So there's always the perception that if you're in government, there's certain processes. People will tell you, no, this is how we do things in government. And there's only one way of doing things in government. But that's not right. If you focus on the outcomes and not so much on the process, it gives you flexibility. It gives you different ways of thinking through problems. The problems that people have to solve in government are pretty similar to what people have solved in the private sector and whatever. The approach to then getting to the solution is what we're trying to change. There's flexibility in how you can do that. And there's no reason why we cannot have entrepreneurial approaches to problem solving and solution findings in government as we do in the private sector. Why is it that we think only the brightest go to private sector, and if you do go to government, you're the person who could not survive in the private sector? That is not right. Our government needs to have just as good and as competent people as we have in the private sector.
Wow. The youth bulge in Africa is seen as the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest threat for the continent. A lot of young, restless people, very interesting here in Harvard, I think at the opening address. Bob Diamond of Atlas Merchant Capital said, our youth are very impatient. They don't want, and I think somebody else said, our youth don't want a long walk to freedom. They want a quick dash to wealth. Yes. Yes. So what words of advice do you have for young people in Africa today?
First of all, let me take a step back and just reflect a bit on your comment about the youth bulge. For me, Africa faces fundamentally two risks. We can talk about our whole economic growth and how vibrant it is, but the reality is that a lot of our economic growth in Africa is jobless. We don't have this kind of economic growth that drove China and the US, which was heavily around manufacturing. Ours is heavily in extractive industries. So I think the World Bank was saying something like 75% of the money, FDI that's coming into Africa is going into extractive industries. Now, those are not big job creating sectors. So you probably employ more people drilling an oil well than running one, but you extract a lot more value in the process. So we're facing a situation whereby we have to change the mindset of young people from big job seekers to job creators. But the system has to be able to support the kids, and the education system has to be able to produce that kind of mindset in the young graduate of today. And it's not, sadly. So my advice to young people is, look at what you're getting, but desire for more.
Stay with the African Leadership Dialogues.
Dealing with all these young people, what makes you most excited about the potential on the African continent?
I think the one fascinating thing about African young people, they have limitless brains.
Wow.
They have no barriers. They have no baggage that they carry with them. They're also very informed, they're very connected. They're growing up in an era where they can know exactly what's happening in Morocco, what's happening in Nigeria.
And they're interested and engaged.
They're very, very interested. If you look at just something as simple as the music culture in Africa at the moment, young people in Kenya are dancing Nigerian music and vice versa. So it's becoming a very integrated Pan-African group and movement of young people. And I think it's how we leverage that energy that will help us. But that same connection could work against us, where the young people become dissatisfied and despondent.
Right. Hopeless.
Hopeless. Exactly.
What advice would you give the leaders watching the show right now as to what they need to start to do to change the situation and give these young people hope?
I think first of all is to recognize that the demographic dividend we've got in Africa at the moment, 70% of us under 30, is a big asset, but only if we harness it correctly. Otherwise, it's going to become a huge liability. And I think the challenge with Africa is to also have a lot of cultural baggage where young people should be left, you cannot speak in a table where they're over 50s because you're 18. And sometimes it's the content of the voice and not so much the person who's speaking that you need to be paying attention to. Very important. Take what is being said on merit, not on who it's coming from. Okay? There's huge need for us to give young people a voice. Don't speak on their behalf. There's a tendency for us to want to speak on the young people's behalf. Let them speak for themselves.
Because in many African cultures, children are seen and not heard.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, and that has to change. I mean, the future of this continent is about how we harness this latent energy, latent potential we've got. I mean, I'll give you an example. We sent, one of the things we do at the Academy, we send our kids for various conferences as part of exposing them, because we believe if these kids are going to be the ones speaking on behalf of Africa 15, 20 years from now, start making them know what it means like to be speaking at a big conference at the age of 15, 16. So our kids go speak at the G8, Aspen, World Economic Forum. So
that's amazing.
Exactly. So by the age of 25, you're not intimidated to go and speak in front of an audience of 2,000.
You're African, you're proud, you're informed,
exactly.
And yes.
And you're sure of yourself.
Right.
And they were at a conference where there were African presidents, and the minute the young people came to speak, the African presidents walked out.
Because they thought this is now
exactly.
yeah. Oh.
how are we portraying confidence? How are we conveying belief in our young people? Knowing that, by the way, if all young people in this continent registered as voters and voted, we can vote in a very young leadership into the continent. But there's also a need for and responsibility for young people to then want to be part of the political system in being able to influence the leadership of the continent, and not sell their souls to someone who's willing to either pay them for their votes or whatever. So I think the leadership in this continent has a huge opportunity to take this continent at a speed of development that we haven't seen before, if they can tap into the energy of young people. Because young people are going to come with, it's naive energy, yes, but it's a huge motivation, a huge energy that can be steered in the right direction.
It may be naive energy, but very often it's where the purest of dreams lie.
Exactly.
And as you've said, the fuel that would give us as communities and societies. To all the leaders watching and to African presidents watching, 70% youth population, you're getting up to walk out when they speak. It might be wise to take a moment and listen. Let's come now to the way forward for Africa. And one of the things that I think is most powerful about Africa Leadership Academy is the fact that you do have a mix of Africans there from different parts of the continent. And in so many ways, we were so disconnected. We were connected to our colonial masters, but we weren't connected to each other. And now all of a sudden you have groups of young people who are interconnected across the continent. What's the power of these networks?
It's phenomenal. So, to give you an example, if you've been reading the news in the past couple of months, there was a bit of beef between South Africa and Nigeria. But our kids, you'll find South Africans going to spend their school breaks in Nigeria because they've developed a relationship with another African. And they don't see countries, they don't see religion. They see this is someone from my continent who I like, who I've gotten to understand a lot better, who some of the myths I thought existed about them because I only read in the papers are not exactly true. Everyone thinks, or every Nigerian is a con man, every Kenyan can run.
Right.
Which is not always correct. So we do some very deliberate things at the academy, for example. You never share a room with someone from your country. We eat a different African food every Friday. We have a guest speaker program where we bring in a lot of inspirational African speakers to come and speak to the kids. We have cultural days, so we'll have an East Africa Cultural Day, West Africa Cultural Day. We have a lot of things that we do just to even put kids in situations to understand what it means to live in Africa. So for example, the other day, we had a compassion day. We get kids from refugee camps, and we had everyone live like a refugee for one day.
Wow. To experience the suffering.
People slept on the floor, they had small rations of food. So you can understand what it means like when some of your colleagues tell you, I have lived in a refugee camp. But some of those kids who probably have grown up in the middle of Santon or Lekki in Lagos or Karen in Nairobi in a rich families would never have really understood what it means like. So that empathy that you get from experiencing and walking in someone else's shoes really makes you think differently about it. And what we're seeing in the academy is very much that kind of Pan-Africanism that is growing and is being inculcated in our population very, very early. So that's why you're finding some of our kids saying that they don't necessarily want to go and work in their home countries when they come back. Someone say, an Ethiopian say, I'd like to go and work in Tanzania. I'd like to go and work in another country. And it's also inspiring some very innovative things. So one of our students, for example, Priscilla Sempere from Malawi, is writing what is arguably Africa's first Pan-African storybook. Wow. She's 18. So from our experience in the academy, she decided she's going to write a book series for kids to tell African kids what it means like to be in a different country. So she's telling it through the eyes of Ekari, a 10-year-old Malawian. And each book in the series will be Ekari visiting one African country.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay? So she's going to write 55 of these books, okay, and tell the African story differently.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So in many ways, I hope schools are watching and listening, because some of the tools that you're using could be applied easily in other schools across the continent. Actually, my connection with Africa, which I didn't realize till recently, was because I went to a boarding school that had many African children. I had a friend, Liberia exploded when we were in school, and she had no home to go to. And those experiences of connecting with other Africans, I think, put a seed somewhere. So it's so important to make those connections. Just to wind up now, please look into the camera and give the continent your message. What must we all do to start to change Africa?
I think, first of all, as Africans, we must truly believe in ourselves. That, for me, is one of the most important things about this continent. We are very capable, and the strange thing about Africa is that we are a lot more similar than we are different. That is one thing we have to realize. If you went to marry a girl in Kenya and went to marry a girl in Nigeria or South Africa, you'd go through the same process. Different languages, different dresses, but you'd go through the same process. And I think there's great value in us doing that. But critical for our future is how we harness the power we have in our young people, how we change our attitudes towards young people, how we stop being dismissive of young people because we just think they're young people, and culturally we've got a bias towards saying, oh, young people, as you said, should be heard,
seen and not heard.
Seen, not heard. And I think we have a huge asset in the young people of the continent, which if we do a good job at, will be a huge asset to the continent. But if we don't, it will be a major liability for us. And the message to Africa is, ask yourself even as an older African, how many young people are tagging onto your trousers, wanting to be like you? What are you doing differently for the young people in your church, in your community, your nieces, your nephews, to inspire them to go beyond what you have achieved? That is the message I'd like to for the continent.
Thank you so much.
Absolute
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Powerful insights there from Frank on education in Africa, and some examples of what's going on at the Africa Leadership Academy could be very instructive for different national stakeholders and education stakeholders across the continent. We hope you've gained some powerful insights from the show today. Right now, let's get your views on the issues.
This week we asked you, how can we best nurture young African minds to develop entrepreneurial skills? Abubakar Usman says, it is said that education is the bedrock of development, and so I think by educating African youth, we will have succeeded in creating a platform for youth to develop whatever skills that is inbuilt in them. There is no limit to what a well-educated person can do. Daniel Miner says, the platform has to be set by providing entrepreneurial training and challenge them to take the risk and venture into business.
Hi, my name is Eric Njoroge, watching Africa Leadership Dialogues from Nairobi. What I think we can do to nurture young minds to have entrepreneurial skills is to organize local assets and place community leaders at the center of the solution. Secondly, is to empower the youth to learn skills of heart and mind and enable them to stand strong on their own feet. And thirdly, is to anticipate the employment trends of the future and adapt skills training accordingly.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD, and on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
Thank you for sharing your views. We always appreciate the engagement, and let's keep it going. Time now for Africa's Top 10.
On Africa's Top 10 this week, we look at Africa's top business schools according to African Economist. Starting us off at number 10 is Gordon Institute of Business Science, GIBS, in Johannesburg. GIBS has consistently been ranked the top business school for open executive education in Africa, and in 2013 the Financial Times ranked GIBS Executive MBA first in Africa and 60th in the world. Coming in at number 9 is University of Stellenbosch Business School, USB, in South Africa. USB is a leading provider of internationally accredited postgraduate management degrees and executive education, and was ranked third globally in the latest edition of the Times Higher Education World University Rankings. At number 8 is University of South Africa, UNISA Graduate School of Business Leadership. UNISA is the leading distance learning business school in Africa and is accredited internationally. The late Nelson Mandela is an alumni of the school. Positioned at number 7 is the Management College of Southern Africa, MANCOSA. MANCOSA is a private institution with a vast network of academic and intellectual capacity in the region, with additional offices in Johannesburg, Polokwane, Mauritius, Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, and Malawi. The University of Dar es Salaam, UDBS, comes in at number 6. The university's business school, UDBS, is one of the leading institutions in business and management research, teaching and consultancy in the sub-Saharan region. It also houses an entrepreneurship center, Institute of Insurance and Risk Management, and the Career Advice Placement and Practical Training Bureau. Slotted in at number 5 is a United States International University, USIU, based in Nairobi, Kenya. USIU is the oldest private university in Eastern Africa, with a curriculum that helps their students accomplish higher levels in their chosen fields and promotes multiculturalism and global understanding overall. Taking the number 4 spot is the University of Nairobi, UON. According to the Ed Universal Business Schools ranking by Palms, the UON School of Business meets the highest category with a Dean's recommendation rate of 108%, the top ranking in Kenya, and a global ranking of 94 out of 396 business schools. Wits University in South Africa comes in at number 3. Wits is one of only 2 universities in Africa ranked in 2 separate international rankings as a leading institution in the world, and is the only university in South Africa that features in the top 1% in the world in 7 defined fields of research according to 2012 ISI international rankings. At number 2 is the American University in Cairo, AUC. The AUC's MBA program has been designated as one of the top 200 in the world according to the QS Global 200 Business Schools report for 2012-2013, and was ranked second with employers in terms of graduate employability. And at number 1 this week is University of Cape Town, UCT. The UCT Graduate School of Business offers one of the most innovative executive MBA courses in the world, and was voted Best Business School in Africa for a 3rd consecutive year in November 2012 at the Ed Universal Global Convention in Prague, Czech Republic. And that's Africa's Top 10 this week.
We end the show today with words from a Moroccan proverb, which is probably replicated in many different ways across different societies in Africa. And this one goes: instruction in youth is like engraving in stone. So what are we doing in our schools and universities to instruct our young people? For that will be an engraving and something that stays with them for the rest of their lives. It's powerful. Blessings to you and blessings to Africa.